Good day. I'm Ivan Jansi Farol, a student in graduate education and professional studies in Romblon State University, taking in Master in Public Administration in my subject PA 212 Public Organization and Management. I'm going to discuss today about the essentials of control. Based on this quotation, the task is not to control the wind, but to direct the movements of the ship so that it stays on course. We will find out what does it mean. As our introduction, then, to understand the key elements of organizational control, often seen in the form of internal systems and processes, as they relate to the planning, organizing, leading, controlling, or POLC framework. So, number one, they should help managers determine whether and why their strategy is achieving the desired results. And number two, there should be an early warning system in cases where the organization is getting a little or a lot of off track. As the fourth facet of POLC, uh, let us define what is organizational control. So, organizational control refers to the process by which an organization influences its subunits and members to behave in ways that lead to the attainment of organizational goals and objectives. When properly designed, such control should lead to better performance because an organization is able to execute its strategy better. Organizational control typically involves four steps: establish standards, measure performance, compare performance to standards, and take corrective action as needed. So what are the costs and benefits of organizational controls? Organizational controls provide significant benefits, particularly when they help the firm stay on track with respect to its strategy. External stakeholders too, such as government, investors, and public interest groups have interest in seeing certain types of or levels of control are in place. However, controls are also came at a cost. An example of financial cost is the fact that organizations are often required to perform and report the results of a financial audit. These audits are typically undertaken by external accounting firms, which charge a substantial fee for their services. Controls can also have costs in terms of our organization culture and reputation. Well, can you imagine the organizations might want to keep track of employee behavior and otherwise put forms of strict monitoring in place? These efforts can have undesirable cultural consequences in the form of reduced employee loyalty, greater turnover, or damage to the organization's external reputation. Third potential cost of having controls is that they can afford less organizational flexibility, flexibility and responsiveness. Typically, controls are put in place to prevent problems, but controls can also create problems. And lastly, the fourth area of cost, but botched implementation may seem obvious, but it is more common than you might think, or the managers might hope. Sometimes the controls are just poorly understood, so that their launch creates significant unintended negative consequences. So let us discuss first the benefits. Uh, first, uh, all the organizational controls comes at a cost. Most controls are valuable management tools. When they are well designed and implemented, they provide at least five possible areas of benefits, including first, good controls help the organization to be efficient and effective by helping managers to control cost and productivity levels. Costs can be controlled using budgets where managers compare actual expenses to forecasted ones. Similarly, productivity can be controlled by comparing how much each person can produce in terms of service or products. Next is quality control. So it's the second benefit of controls. Increasingly, quality can be quantified in terms of response time or accuracy. Some measures of quality are qualitative. The third area by which organizations can benefit from control is opportunity recognition. Opportunities can come from outside of the organization and typically are the result of a surprise. And fourth is controls. also help organizations manage uncertainty and complexity. This is fourth area benefit from well-designed and implemented controls. Perhaps the most easily understood example of this type of benefit is how financial controls help an organization navigate economic downturns. Without budgets and productivity controls in place, the organization may not know it has lost sales or expenses are out of control until it is too late. The fifth area of benefit is organizational control. It's related to decentralized decision making. Organization research have long argued that performance is best when those people and areas of the organization that are closest to customers and pockets of uncertainty also have the ability or information authority to respond to them. There are two levels of control, strategic and operational. Recognizing that organizational controls can be categorized in many ways, it is helpful at this point to distinguish between two sets of controls. Strategic control is concerned with tracking the strategy as it is being implemented, detecting any problem areas or potential problem areas, suggesting that strategy is incorrect, and making any necessary adjustments. Strategic controls is allowing to step back and look at the big picture and make sure all the pieces of the picture are correctly aligned. Operational control, in contrast to strategic control, is concerned with executing the strategy. Where operational controls are imposed, they function with the framework established by the strategy. Normally, these goals, objectives, and standards are established for major subsystems within the organization, such as business units, projects, products, functions, and responsibility centers. There are types of control. It is valuable to understand that within the strategic and operational levels of control, there are several types of control. The first two types can be mapped across two dimensions, level of proactivity and outcome versus behavioral. The following table summarizes this along with examples of such controls might look like. So productivity can be defined as the monitoring of problem in a way that provides their timely prevention rather than after the fact reaction. In management, this is known as feed-forward control. The process of monitoring and adjusting ongoing activities and processes is known as concurrent control. Such controls are necessarily proactive, but they can prevent problems from become worse. For this reason, we often describe concurrent control as a real-time control because it deals with the present. Finally, feedback controls involve gathering information about completed activity, evaluating the information, and taking steps to improve their similar activities in the future. This is the least proactive of controls and generally a basis for actions. Feedback controls permit managers to use information as past performance to bring future performance in line with planned objectives. All these types of control function as a feedback mechanism to help leaders and managers make adjustment in this strategy as perhaps is reflected by changes in planning, organizing, leading components. Controls also differ depending on what is monitored, outcomes, or behaviors. Outcome controls are generally preferable when just one or two performance measures, say return on investment or return on assets, are good gauges of business health. Behavioral controls involve the direct evaluation of manager and employee decision making, not of the results of manager decisions. Behavioral controls is tied rewards to a broader range of criteria such as those identified in the balanced scorecard. Financial control involves the management of a firm costs and expenses to control them in relation to budgeted amounts. Thus, management determines which aspects of its financial conditions, such as assets, sales, or profitability, are most important. So, tries to forecast them through budgets and then compares actual performance to budgeted performance. Non-financial controls track as aspects of the organization that aren't immediately financial in nature, but are expected to lead positive performance outcomes. The theory behind such non-financial control is that they should provide managers with a glimpse of organization's progress well before financial outcomes can be measured. Financial controls. Financial controls are the key element of organizational success and survival. There are three basic financial reports that all managers need to understand and interpret to manage their business successfully. So the balance controls provide the basis for sound management and allow managers to establish guidelines and policies that enable the business to succeed and grow. So budgeting, for instance, generally refers to simple listing of all plans, activity, expenses, and revenues. On the basis of listing and starting balance sheet, you can project a future one. The overall budget you create is a monthly or quarterly projection of what the balance sheet and income statement will look like, but again, based on your list of planned expenses and revenues. So in basic financial reports, the balance sheet. So you can see here, asset example is the current assets, fixed assets, intangible assets, liabilities, the current liabilities, and long-term debt. So if we uh, less the liabilities to the asset, we come up with the owner's equity. The balance sheet is a snapshot of the organization's financial position at a certain point in time. This can be any day of the year, but balance sheets are usually done at the end of each month. This financial statement is a listing of total assets, what the organization owns, items of value, and the total liabilities, what the organization owes. The total assets are broken down into subcategories of current assets, fixed assets, and intangible other assets. The total liabilities are broken into subcategories like current liabilities, long-term liabilities, or debt, and it comes to owner's equity. In assets, there is current assets, those assets that are cash and can readily converted to cash in short term, such as accounts receivable or inventory. Fixed assets are those assets that are not easily converted to cash in short term. That is, there are assets that only change over the long term. Intangible assets may also shown in the balance sheet. This may be goodwill, trademarks, patents, licenses, copyrights, formulas, franchises. In this instance, net means the value of intangible assets minus amortization. Liabilities, on the other hand, are, for example, in the current liabilities, are those coming due in short term, usually the coming year. Long-term debt or liabilities may be banknotes or loans made to purchase the business fixed asset structure. Long-term debt or liabilities come in due period of more than 1 year. The portion of banknote that is not payable in the coming year is a long-term debt or liability. And then the owner's equity refers to the amount of money that owner has invested in the firm. The amount is determined by subtracting current liabilities and long-term debt from total assets. So our next discussion is about basic financial reports, the income, profit, and loss statement or P&L. The profit and loss statement shows the relation of income and expenses for a specific time interval. The income or P&L statement is expressed in 1 month format. The P&L statement is divided into major categories: sales or revenue, cost of goods sold, cost of sales, then gross profit, less operating expenses or fixed and variable expenses equals to net income. But in government service, we only set the revenues, other revenues, then less the expenditures, capital expenditures, then uh, uh, maintenance and operating expenses, donations, etc. And then the net would be net surplus or net deficit. Next is the cash flow statement. The cash flow statement is the detail of cash received and cash expended for each month of the year. Projected cash flow statement helps managers determine whether the company has positive cash flow. The process of reconciling cash flow is similar to the process you follow in reconciling your bank checking account. The cash flow statement is composed of beginning cash on hand, cash receipts, deposits for the month, cash paid out for the month, and ending cash position. The cash flow statement, so as you can see, it's the same with the reconciliation of your checking account example or your bank account. So whatever is in the beginning of your uh, for example, January 1st, whatever the beginning balance of the January 1st account, then you will add all the receipts and deposits, and then you will less the disbursements or all that was paid out that was cleared in the bank, no, it is checking account, or it was cleared through cash, and then you will see the ending cash position. It should be balanced based on what's in book and what's on the actual. It could be actual cash or actual uh, bank statement. So what are the non-financial controls? Non-financial controls are defined as controls where non-financial performance outcomes are measured. The outcome needs to be measured because they are likely to affect profitability in the long term. Examples of non-financial controls are human resources, marketing, production, purchasing, research and development, customer service. So, what are the common mistakes with the non-financial controls? Research shows that those firms or organizations that put these non-financial controls in place and can validate them each much higher revenues than those that don't. With the aim of working toward understanding how to put such controls into place, let's first look at common mistakes that organizations make. So first is non-using of non-financial controls. As discussed earlier, the examples of non-financial controls. If it is poorly conceived or implemented, non-financial controls are certainly a cost for organization, such ineptness is no defense for not including them in every modern organization system or controls. Let's simply look at the relationship between customer satisfaction and retail store sales. A dissatisfied customers are to get back and may have been dissatisfied enough to leave the store before even making the first purchase. So second is not linked to strategy. This mistake appears to be common one, but its root cause, failure to adapt the control system to the specific strategy of the organization, is not obvious. Several things can go wrong when non-financial controls are not linked to strategy. First, control systems tend to be tied to reward system. If managers and employees are being paid based on the achievement of certain non-strategic non-financial outcomes, then uh, then then the firm strategy and hence performance could suffer. Second, if the controls are not linked to strategy or the linkage are unclear, then managers do not really understand which non-financial controls are the most important. So next is failing to validate the links. There are two big challenges that organizations face when trying to use non-financial controls. First, non-financial controls are indirectly related to financial performance. The relationship is like the sequence of non-financial outcomes that cascade down to financial performance. For instance, good employee recruiting leads to satisfied employees, which leads to an employee base to create value, which leads to satisfied customer, which leads to profitable customer buying pattern, which leads to good profitability. So the second challenge is once you've taken the step of identifying these linkages, the show that linkage actually exists. So third is failing to set appropriate performance targets. The third common area of weakness in the use of non-functional controls is somewhat related to the second. Our example with technology shows this relationship well. Failing to set appropriate performance targets can take on another form. In such cases, instead of setting inappropriate non-financial controls and related targets, the organization simply has set too many. So measurement of failure. The fourth failing is somewhat technical, but is also related to validity and validation. That is, in many cases, an inappropriate measure is used to assess whether a target non-financial control is being achieved. This can happen for a number of reasons. First, different parts of the business may assess customer satisfaction differently. Second, even when a common basis for evaluation is used, the meaning may not be clear in the context of how it is measured. We have discussed the five challenges and mistakes in non-financial controls. Now there are five possible solutions. One is the use of non-financial controls. So let us step back and reflect on the organization's strategy, then pick one or several non-financial controls such as customer or employee satisfaction as a starting point. It is critical that you start with conceptual model using simple boxes and arrows in terms of uh, models of what non-financial control leads to another and so on. Tie the control to strategy. Be sure to confirm that whichever non-financial controls are in place, they reflect and reinforce the unique strategy of the organization. This also should remind you that if the strategy ever changes, you should go back and revalidate the links between the non-financial controls and the strategy. Validate the links between non-financial and financial controls. Organizations often use uh, more than use that one financial control with the assumption that they cascade down to bottom. line financial performance. Of course, when there are few non-financial controls, it is easier to detect relationships among them. Regardless, with information collected about the controls, management must seek to use simple statistical techniques to verify the causal relationship between one control and another and eventually financial performance. So set appropriate performance targets. Extending the prior example, you would want to be sure that you set employee and customer satisfaction control targets appropriately. So first is validate the performance measure. Finally, make sure that what you ultimately measure fits well with the control objectives. As a reminder, this type of validation is relevant to non-financial and financial measures alike. Now, is lean control. Lean control, or simply lean, has become immensely popular business control and improved methodology in recent years. Lean control is a number of things. According to James Womack, uh, it is process of measuring and reducing inventory and streamlining production. It is means for changing the way a company or organization measure plant performance. It is a knowledge-based system. It takes years of hard work, preparation, support from upper management. Lean is so named because it purports to use much less of certain resources, like space, inventory, workers, etc., than it used by normal mass production system to produce comparable output. So Lean is a highly refined example of non-financial control in action. Lean is a system of non-financial controls used to improve product and service quality and decrease waste. So what is the applications of Lean? The ultimate objective of Lean is the avoidance of muda, or a wasteful activity. In all business operations, the muda comprises seven deadly waste. So therefore, uh, waste includes the production of defective products that must be made or fixed, the production of more products than the market will buy, excessive work in process inventories, over-processing, unnecessary movement of people or products, unnecessary waiting of people. Those are examples of muda or wasteful activity. So what are the seven deadly waste? Muda in Japanese term for activity that is wasteful and doesn't add value. It's also a key concept in lean control. Waste reduction is an effective way to increase profitability. Here are the seven deadly waste along with their definitions. So first is defects. Prevent the customer from accepting the product produced. The effort to create these defects is washed. Overproduction is the production or acquisition of items before they are actually required. Transportation is a cost with no added value. In addition, each time a product moves, it stands the risk of being damaged, lost, and delayed. Fourth, waiting differs in both time spent by workers waiting for resources to arrive, the queue for the products to empty, as well as the capital sunk in goods and services that are not yet delivered to customer. So five, inventory in the form of raw materials, work in progress, or finished goods represents a capital outlay that has not yet produced an income either by a producer or the consumer. Number six, motion refers to the actions performed by the producer, worker, or equipment. Motion has significant damage, wear, and safety. Number seven, overprocessing is defined as using a more expensive or otherwise valuable resource than is needed for the task, or adding features that are designed for but unneeded by the customer. Now, there are five core principles of Lean. So, the first core principle of Womack Jones Lean framework is that value must be defined and specified from the customer's perspective. Where this simply seems enough, it requires much more than high-sounding generic statements. To be meaningful, value must be defined in terms of the specific products. So let us describe the value stream for each product or service. So the second core principle of Lean is to describe the value stream for each product or service, or in some cases for groups or families or from similar products or services. The value stream is a set of activities that the organization is performing to bring a finished product to a customer or client. And then create flow in each value stream. The third essential principle is Lean is embodied in the word flow. When a value stream has been completely described as necessary, non-value adding activities has been eliminated. The basic idea of flow is to arrange the remaining activities sequentially so that the production moves smoothly and continuously from one activity to the next. Fourth is to produce at the pace or pool of actual customer demand. Producing at the pace or pool of actual customer demand is the fourth key principle of Lean. One of the greatest benefits of moving from traditional batch and queue manufacturing to continuous flow production is that lead times fall dramatically. So, lastly is strive to continuously improve all business operations. The fifth core principle of Lean is continuous improvement, expressed in Japanese word Kaizen. Companies that implement Lean adopt the mindset that it is also possible to improve any business activity, that they regulate conduct Kaizen events throughout their organizations to improve specific process and operations. So now, crafting your balance scorecard. So balance scorecard is a system that translates an organization's vision, mission, and strategy into specific quantifiable goals and to monitor the organization's performance in terms of achieving these goals. The balanced scorecard approach or examines performance in four areas. Financial analysis, the most traditionally used performance indicator, includes assessments of measures such as operating cost and return on investment, whereas the scorecard identifies financial and non-financial areas of performance. The second step in scorecard process is the development of strategy map. The idea is to identify key performance areas in learning and growth and show how this cascade forward into the internal, customer, and financial performance. With the scorecard and strategy map in hand, managers then break broad goals down successively into vision, strategic initiatives, and metrics. As an example, imagine that an organization has the goal of maintaining employee satisfaction in its vision and mission statements. This will be the organization's vision in the domain of learning and growth, since employee satisfaction is directly related to financial performance. Strategies for achieving that learning and growth vision might include approaches such as increasing employee management communication. Finally, managers would want to test their assumptions about the relationship between employee satisfaction and the downstream areas such as internal, customer, and financial performance. For example, satisfied employees may be more productive and less likely to quit, which leads to better products or services or customer relation, which leads to lower employee recruiting and training costs and greater sales and repeat sales. This sequence of causal relationships is summarized in the following figure. Social psychologist Hubert Rampersad has sought to translate the business balance scorecard into personal balance score by providing you with the following suggestions. Learning and growth, your skills and learning ability. How do you learn and how do you successful in the future? For example, the course that you're taking in conjunction with this book may lead to a degree, but a prerequisite for other course and so on. Internal, so your physical health and mental state. How can you control this to create your value for yourself and others? How can you remain feeling good at work as well as in spare time? For instance, your objectives and activities relate to physical and emotional fitness. Third, customer in external sense, relations with your spouse, children, friends, employer, colleagues, and others. How they see you. And lastly, financial stability. To what degree are you able to fulfill your financial needs? Again, do you seek financial independence, resources to fund and other endeavors? Now, as I end my presentation, as I always say, always add value. Be an asset to your organization. If you have any question or please feel free to ask. Thank you. Good day.